Good evening, everybody.
Evening.
Good evening, Ken.
Good to see everyone. Tonight we got Tom. It's been a while. Glad to see Tom back with us, David, and of course, Dr. Ricks. If you would start us out. Oh, by the way, welcome everyone to episode 405. Has modern science disproved evolution supporting intelligent design? And if you would start us out, Dr. Ricks, that.
Okay, we're gonna groan, but this time groan with an old joke form that we rarely hear called knock knock jokes. So here we go. Knock knock. Who's there? Seymour. Seymour who? Seymour Kitten's out here. Okay, knock knock. Who's there? Shad. Shad who? Shad up and open the door. I have a stunned audience here. Knock knock. Who's there? Sharon. Sharon who? Sharon and Sharon alike. And my last one. If you can handle it. The last one. Who's there? Knock knock. Who's there? Sherwood. Sherwood who? Sure would like for you to let me in. Those are clean jokes you can tell around your grandmother. Maybe. Okay. Now we're going from the simple jokes to the complexity of science. Modern science disproves evolution because of something called intelligent design. Does what we've learned is every living cell has information programmed information. A biological version of computer programming into every cell. It's a great discovery. They now know things are needed for any living creature. Matter, energy, and information. And the information has to be put in advance to make the creature do all the things it's supposed to do. And by the way, I guess they've known this for a while. It's worth saying it. There is no such thing as simple one cell animal. I know that was part of Darwin's thing, simple, complex. There's not any one cell animal you can get under a microscope. Look at its nucleus. They're not simple. And they couldn't build one in the lab and make it alive. Turn it on. They're just not simple. By the way, as far as we know, this is a few decades old. I mean, they discovered DNA. I don't think they fully appreciated it as a computer biological code until recent decades. So obviously, people in the past, like Darwin, had no idea the information that's every living cell. Now, what Darwin and other scientists would say, 19th century, when they saw the obvious design in organisms, they said, well, that's natural selection. In other words, it's the survival of the fittest. You just keep getting more fit, and it goes into your genes. But see, that would only explain minor improvements and adaptations, but it doesn't explain the major information that's different in all these major organisms. To decide whether you grow up to be a whale, an elephant, a giraffe, or the nice young man that you are. It's all in the genes. And this digitally encoded information directs all the molecules in your nucleus to do all the things they do. And each species is totally unique in its DNA coding. Just a few differences in key places makes all the difference in the world in this species. Let's pull up first scripture.
All right. And then God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb that yields seed, and the fruit tree that yields fruit according to its kind. And the earth brought forth grass, the herb that yields seed according to its kind, and the tree according to its kind. And God saw that it was good.
And they can crossbreed things, but only so much. If the kind is different, the coding just won't work, and they can't do it or make it continue to live and reproduce. They're, if you want to call them information valleys and gulfs between species. So what we find in the coding of animals fits what the Bible said. Now, obviously, that first quote was about plants, the same system. Let's go to the next scripture, same thing he said about animals, of course.
Okay. Then God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature according to its kind, cattle and creeping things and beasts of the earth. I wonder if your speakers are reverbing back into your mic, Tom, because people are saying they can hear Dr. Rick's echoing back through. Are you using headphones?
Well, I had the mic off.
All right. Well, then I don't know where it's coming from. I think maybe it's
okay. Hey, honey, can you turn the volume down just a little bit?
Because I can hear you perfectly fine at my end, but they're not. All right, I got it. I found it. I fixed it. Never mind.
Okay, we're okay. By the way, let me tell you an experiment. I'm aware of a number of them from biology classes in college. There's one where, because mice can be bred faster, they kept cutting off mice tails and breeding the truncated mice together, see if they could make the new breed change. And for some strange reason, all the new breeds had mice tails of the normal length. It didn't work. Yeah. Now what that tells me, I'm giving my opinion. Obviously, these are complex issues. Is even the ability to adapt to environmental changes must be built into the coding of the animal. In other words, there's some adaptations the animal just cannot make, regardless of how you treat it. But there are some things, apparently they've done this with dogs and maybe sheep. If you keep breeding the longest hair sheep or longest hair dogs together, and you're going to move to a very cold climate, you can eventually get a breed of dogs where like 99% of them come out with super tough coats, and I think goats and sheep to handle the climate. But I would argue those adaptations potentials must be built in the coding. Does that make sense? And animals can make some adaptations, but there are limits to what they can do. But I think it's built, it's like you build a machine that's so good, it can make adjustments for bad road, good road. Does that make sense?
Yeah, adaptation is a normal part of life and breeding, and how to get different types of breeds of dogs and how to change colors and how to get different colors. That's adaptation. That's not evolution. It don't go from one species to another. It just changes maybe the color of a pigeon from one generation to the next. It doesn't turn it into.
And what you could argue is God may have put the potential for all those varieties in the gene pool somewhere, and only if you concentrate it in one way or another will you get the pure breed that's got more of this and a whole lot less of that. But the potential was there. So like a car with a big dial for off-road, for snowy road, for deep ice, I don't know. In other words, even the things and animals that we are most impressed with, God probably programmed that into their potential as well.
Well, a good perfect example is Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve weren't multicolored. But yet from them, we have all the different races that we have today.
Yeah.
It was all built into their DNA. That's right. And in fact, I've never really studied this myself, but I understand that I'm trying to see if I get this right. 2 white parents can have a black baby, or it's the other way around.
Some genes are dominant and some are not dominant. I know some monks actually figured that out. I used to know the formula. And some things have more than one gene to control it. So it's more complicated. But I think, I better not say I know the full answer to that because it's tricky. But I do think we know a few examples of people who had a little bit of, maybe they were like 1/8 black, but the way the genes fell out, the kids could pass for white unless you really knew what to look for. But usually it goes the other way. They're a little darker, or their hair is a little different or thicker than if they were pure European. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and none of us really knows what we are. I mean, from way back, we don't know.
Probably if somebody could get a whole lot of generations, like 3 generations, study it carefully. By the way, the monks who came up with the original gene theory, they were using flowers, and they actually made a box, and the box has the monk's name on it. I had all these biology classes, but it's like 40, what's that, 50 years ago. I'm old enough. Look, you forget all those names. But with flowers, you can make a lot of different easy adjustments. And they figured out the pattern. So you can make certain color flowers by crossbreeding certain ones. Obviously, it's harder with animals that live a long time, like people and some other animals. But everything is controlled by that coding that you get from your parents and grandparents. And and I don't know if this even makes sense, but I even think behavioral things like weaknesses. Some people have a proclivity, they think they've proven it, to be alcoholics, and they could have gotten from their grandparents.
Yeah, I believe that. I think I can prove that through my own, not my family, but I know families that have had that problem down through succeeding generations. Because you can drink a lot of alcohol on a regular basis and not become an alcoholic. And then there are those who become alcoholics and can't drink ever again without forming the habit all over again of continually drinking.
And I think that's also maybe a danger of hard drugs. I read an article where they think it is probably genetically inherited. Some brains are more easily get hooked on different kinds of substances. Could be nicotine, it could be cocaine, where other people, it's harder for them to become addicted. In other words, if you have the wrong, I'll say this, if you have the wrong kind of genes, you could take a drug like meth and get hooked on one application, and your body will crave it for years. And that seems unfair. And the other side of that, some people have talent that the only way you can explain it is they inherit it from their parents or grandparents.
That I can attest to. My grandfather, my dad's dad, was very, very good with his hands, built a lot of things, built his own home from the ground up, did a lot of that kind of stuff. And I've done that myself. I mean, I can build a lot of things. I build guitars. My dad before me was very into working and building things with wood and so forth. And it seems it just passed on. It's not something I had to go to school and learn. It was just seemed like it was just naturally there that I started doing it, and I just naturally got better at it.
And one way to look at that is if you have a particular talent, we may not even know how to categorize all human talents, but whatever talent you think you've got, Instead of getting vain and puffed up over it, you may have simply been lucky enough to get the right genes.
It sure seems that there's people in the world that we say, well, just, money just falls into their lap, but it's not that. They're so talented from an entrepreneurial standpoint that they are able to make money because they're smart and they can figure out how to do that, how to create businesses and how to make them grow and then go and do another business.
Let me ask you this, Ken. Have you met somebody who says they can visualize how things should be organized, lined up, or put together? I mean, they don't have to have it all on a big diagram. They can almost see it in their mind.
Yeah, I can see math problems in my head. I can see story problems, let me put it that way, in my head. When I was a little kid, one day they kept me, I was probably in second grade, they kept me in from uh, uh, the playground. I didn't get to go out to the playground during recess. They wanted to talk to me, all the teachers from that grade, and they wanted to know how I could see and solve all these story problems that all the other kids were struggling with. It was some weird thing that something new they were doing, and the other kids couldn't figure it out. And I said, all I can tell you is I can see the answer. I don't have to write it down. I don't have to see the problem. But when I read the problem, I just see the answer. And they didn't know what to do.
But that's a great gift. And I imagine that when you're putting machines or barns together, or you're making one of those diagrams where you plan everything, the person who can visualize it has an advantage. Obviously, it's true of animals. Like, you can buy a dog who can herd sheep because it's in his DNA, based on his parents and grandparents. And think about that. Means God programmed, not only, dogs are quite the animal, very athletic, they got great hearing, super smelling, but also they got behavioral things programmed into them. Isn't that amazing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, German Shepherds naturally herd. You can take a German Shepherd who's never herded sheep, and I know this because I've trained with shepherds, and you can put them in a pen with sheep, and the dog will naturally start to herd the sheep around.
Yeah, and see, and you got to give God a lot of credit. It's one thing to program mechanical, biomechanical things, but also the software of how they behave. And most animals, if you study them carefully, there's something amazing about their behavior. All kinds of things. Mating behavior, herd behavior, I don't know, just all kinds of things. There are birds that can fly halfway around the planet. As far as we know, like, we have not a Canadian geese where we are. They have to leave Canada before the snow gets there. And they have to know when to leave and when to go back. As far as we can tell, there's no visual signs. They just know. Isn't that amazing?
Mm-hmm.
They also know to fly in a certain V formation, so they face less wind resistance. Anyway, there are all kinds of things about animals. Orcas in the ocean know how to do certain things as water, like a water wolf pack almost. All I can say is God's programming is really quite amazing.
I wish he'd program children to learn to stop pooping their pants a lot faster. It would take them a year to learn to walk. I mean, come on.
And what we know is that programming is like controls the molecular machinery in every cell to make it do what it does. By the way, that's what a virus does. A virus is sub-cell thing. Now, whether it's alive or not is debatable, but it comes in. If it has the ability to get inside the cell, it does, and it messes up the molecular mechanism and makes it produce more viruses like itself, and at least it makes many of the cells sick and not functioning. And I guess they focus on lung cells the most, but that's like a system that's programmed to sabotage the information mechanism. Is that weird? But God must have made that too, because that's a complex little thing. Very little, but complex. So the next thing to look at, some scientists have said, well, we'll find some flaws in the theory of intelligent designer because they want to get rid of it. We think they have ulterior motives. So one of the things that they said was, hey, if you put into a computer program to look for a family tree, you'll find a family tree, the smallest simple animal, and you branch out to the bigger ones. And once scientists looked at that more closely, they actually found, one, the algorithms in the program are designed to find a family tree, so it's going to find one. But when you look at individual molecule systems inside that cell, they give you different contradictory family trees. Also, they have thought in the past, they found some genes, they call them orphan genes or junk genes. They say, hey, they're genes that are left over from some evolution of the past. They don't do anything. Guess what? As science goes on and gets more and more data, they find those orphan or junk genes actually do function. They just couldn't find out the function right away. It took a while. It's almost like, remember when people used to say tonsils were a vestige of some former animal and tonsils had no function? Mm-hmm. I'm old enough to remember when they used to think that. Guess what? They now think the tonsils is a shield in your throat to help you fight infection.
Mm-hmm. It was big business to remove your kids' tonsils. They don't even take them out anymore. It was business. Let's make some money off of this. I don't know what it is. Cut it out, charge them for it. Lie to them and tell them this will save them.
Yeah. And sometimes what science hasn't yet discovered, they say, hey, we found a mistake in the system. No, you haven't. Just something you haven't figured out yet. So that's, and so now they're having to back off that theory. I want to go to 2 Peter 3, talk about the motives that the elites have in this world to push the evolution and similar theories.
All right, I'm going to give it a shot. We're having trouble with the screen. Well, I'm just going to read it. Knowing this first, that scoffers will come in the last days, walking according to their own lusts, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation.
And that's 2 Peter 3:3, if you want to look it up. What we were thinking when I read that scripture was according to their own lust. Some translations even put the word evil in there, but whatever you want to use. A lot of the elites of this world do not want to believe in the second coming of Jesus Christ. They do not want to believe in an intelligent designer. They do not want to believe in God because they have motives. By the way, Karl Marx and some of those guys in his generation, awful human beings. You read about their personal lives, awful human beings. I mean, they did horrible things. If there was any reason to not want to believe in God, they didn't want to think about ever facing their maker for their mistakes. I mean, they wouldn't get rid of any such thoughts. And I believe that is true. We have some of the scientists that are quoted in some books I've read, and including two as a reference here. They said, regardless of what data is found, they will not consider an intelligent designer as a possible solution to the problem. We all know why, right?
Well, everyone's inspired by Satan. And interestingly enough, a researcher in Britain found that there's a correlation between the age of a child and education level and belief in God. The young children, very young, they tend to believe in God. As they get older and become more educated, they believe less and less until you finally get to the university level, and people with high degrees, the highest levels of atheists are at that level. And I think a lot of it has to do with arrogance, and I think they begin to think that they can find the answers to everything without having to go to God.
It comes with the problem is belief in God comes with morality. There's right and wrong. Nobody wants to be told what to do. They want to follow their own lusts and whatever. And if you believe in God, that means you can't be gay. Believe in God, you can't be, you can't abort children, so you can't lie. There's a great movie out there called Expelled by Ben Stein.
It's called Estelle?
Expelled.
Expelled by Ben Stein?
You got to see it.
Expelled. I'm going to write that down. I've seen something by Ben Stein. He is a very clever guy. He did a movie, it was against socialism, but I can't remember the title of it. But here's something to think about. As I hear more and more, and by the way, they want to give free school and free first 2 years of college as part of that new bill. Think about it. And some say they want to require it of everybody. That's all those years of brainwashing. Think about what they're going to be like when they get out of there. They're going to start brainwashing at age 3 to age 20. Whoa. Someone, I've heard this on the radio recently, unless you're in a good school system, very good one, you might want to consider homeschooling or private schools. They say public schools and universities will definitely turn your kids against God, and maybe anti-American and a whole bunch of other stuff, and maybe even a little bit of anti-parent.
My daughter-in-law does a phenomenal job with my granddaughter, homeschooling her. That kid's really smart and straight A student, and she's not being corrupted. Her mom's doing a phenomenal job.
By the way, when they give the SAT test, homeschoolers on average score higher than public school grads, considerably higher. They like that.
Yeah, we homeschool. Well, Dolores homeschooled our children till 5th grade, and they did quite.
Yeah, it's like, especially if you're in a bigger urban area, I'd almost bet the schools are bad for your kids' ideals.
Oh, the schools are terrible. Ken, are you including Kenny and they did well?
Yeah,
just curious. Oh, the girl sings great, but let's talk about Kenny.
He actually scored higher when he was in homeschooling tests than Kristen.
Really?
Wow.
No, I'm just picking on Kenny because he slammed the door in my face in Dalton. He thought that was funny.
Yeah. Ken's kids are very clever. His daughter's written 2 novels or something like that.
I've got her books.
I want to talk a little bit about how the data has really destroyed evolution. But I want to mention first that open thinking is verboten on college campuses, and they're trying to make it that way. By the way, I don't know everything that Tom Gruden, by the way, who coached at the college I used to teach at, by the way. We gave him his first coaching job. Anyway, Gruden got fired, and I'm not saying everything he said 11 years ago was appropriate, but it was private back and forth to somebody who probably thought similarly. And they said the real crime is thinking. If you think the wrong thing, you might email or type the wrong thing or say the wrong thing, it's going to get to the point where they're going to want to control your thinking. And that's a bit scary. It's like 1984, but with new technologies. They can go back into your record. I'll bet there's some people whose records they don't want to go into because they're politically advantageous not to. But still, they want to make an example of somebody they can. Go into their record, find something. Your thinking was so politically incorrect. How would you have thought that, even privately? You see how wrong that is? Mm-hmm. Well, that's part of what's the problem with evolution, thought control. You can't, you must accept it even if the facts don't fit. Can we look at Isaiah 59:13?
Nope, I got it now. I got it back.
Okay.
Let's see. In transgressing and lying against the Lord and departing from our God, speaking oppression and revolt, conceiving and uttering from the heart words of falsehood, justice is turned back and righteousness stands afar off. For truth is fallen in the street and equity cannot enter. And I got to take 1 second here and fix Tom's alignment because it got out of whack. And hopefully that holds.
Truth, I love that expression, truth has fallen in the streets. All kinds of things are not, they don't give people the accurate and full information, but on college campuses, they actually, I know this for an actual fact. As biology learns more and more of the complexity of the cells within plants and animals, if you even mention intelligent designer to many biologists, they get angry. I mean, angry. So some explosively angry. You think, why are you so angry? If the truth and the facts are supporting you, you might laugh and say, "Ah, you poor ignorant idiot, you don't know the real truth." But they get angry, defensively angry. Doesn't that tend to show you the evidence is grating at their conscience, but it's verboten to think it?
Yeah, anytime you talk to somebody about something, you want to discuss a topic, and they get angry, it's because they don't know. They can't defend themselves, and that's why they get angry. It's just a reaction. And I can tell you something else about, if you don't mind, about evolution. I grew up in the church. I was told, evolution's wrong, and I believed it, but I never really looked into it until I went to college, and I took 2 semesters of geology because I always loved rocks. First semester was great. Second semester of geology was nothing but evolution. And after having contact with the actual study of it, I realized just how ridiculously stupid and illogical it is. And we've all heard of the missing link. Well, there's literally in their chart, they say everything revolved from this point up, and then right here, and then there's a big gap, and then it starts off with more modern animals. And right in that big space, it's nothing but white paper. They say, we don't know how it did it, but it jumped from here to here, and we're still looking for the link.
The missing link, yeah. Every now and then.
My brother was in probably 2nd grade, 3rd grade. He was pretty little. Teacher was explaining evolution, and he raised his hand. He says, how long does it take a typewriter to evolve? And she said, well, a typewriter can't evolve. It's too complex. He goes, and my mind can. And I'm talking, he was.
You know what? One real easy way to illustrate what you were saying is you walk into a audience of people with a rock in your hand, and you walk in and you tell that audience of people that you can take that rock and I can turn it into a human being, and they think you crazy. But if you tell them I can do it in 10 billion years, then all of a sudden you're brilliant. Because that's what they believe. They believe the rain fell onto the rocks and the rocks wore down and it ran into a soup in the oceans, and lightning struck it, and it was some primordial goo, and all of a sudden you had a single cell organism. But if you don't add the 10 billion years in there, however many they want to add, you're an idiot. But when you add all the time, all of a sudden you look like you know what you're talking about.
And right after the lightning hit it, the doctor yelled, "It's alive!"
Frankenstein movie.
Exactly.
Watch that movie, Expelled by Ben Stein. He breaks it down. He makes these professors look so stupid, and these scientists look so stupid. And at the end, he has scientists come on and explain that there's no way we could have evolved.
I think I might have actually.
And by the way, you know, you hear them talk about it's settled science. Actually, science is always searching for new truth and to adjust or improve on theories. Like they made improvements on the theory of gravitation and how it bends around in space, but I don't understand it, but I know they made improvements. The only science that is settled is something that no one would ever even bring up again because there's no data that would even make you question it, like, is the world flat? So if there's data that questions, say, the efficacy of anything in medicine or whatever, it's not settled science. And science has been wrong. I mean, you study the history of science, they've been wrong, like, well, a whole lot of different things they've been wrong on, and constant state theory. I can't remember all, but I had a bunch of them written down. And then they learned some new stuff. So, we didn't even understand it. We thought we knew, but we didn't know. But by the way, there's a Cambrian outbreak in the rocks where suddenly complex creatures are found in the rock history. So actually, if they were true with geology, there's quite a bit of things that don't fit evolution. The one thing about the information that's key is in some of the books, and we'll give you the reference, the one book at the end of this paper, where they go through the details, the coding in your DNA sort of can be look like a lock on a bike, you know, bike lock combination. But say you have 20 in a rotor instead of 10 or 4, and you have 4 rotors, you get an unbelievably vast number of combinations. Then you bring that out to 48. And in some things like amino acids, there's a large number of possible choices. And you bring that out to all the different spots on the DNA. And in other words, for this kind of combination to come out accurately, to do what it's supposed to do, by chance is like 1 was 20 to the 150th power. That's 150 zeros. That makes that number like stretches all across the room. You know, there's no way that happened by chance. And also, Ken, remember what you were telling me about mutations in genes?
Oh yeah, they did fruit flies, and they tried to get a better fruit fly. They figured, well, we can prove evolution by mutating fruit flies. For that, they did thousands of generations of fruit flies, and trying to get a better fruit fly. Try saying that 5 times. No, but no matter how many, I think it was maybe hundreds of thousands or millions of fruit flies, not one fruit fly was better than the original fruit fly. They were all they weren't as good as the original. They were all sub of the original fruit fly, and all mutations were worse, so they couldn't prove it. So I mean, it just got worse and worse. You would think one would be a little better if you could improve and mutate a fruit fly and get a better one, a stronger one, a more resistant one to disease. None of that. They all were a mess.
So every time they found a mutated gene, or you might call it genetic disease or something, in a fruit fly, and they tried to mate it, it actually made the animal weaker and sicker. Those mutations are damaged. They see in all the sci-fi flicks, he's mutated. Now the monster's 10 times stronger and 5 times smarter. Mutations generally kill you. I mean, kill the organism or make it weaker. It's not it's not a way to lead to more organized. It takes good programming to make these things work. And God is a master programmer, and scientists have admitted that the programming they see in our cells better than any human computer programmer we have today.
Yeah, you cannot improve on what God has already designed by mutating it. You just can't do it.
Now you can crossbreed, but even there, I think God made the potential for all kinds of varieties, and you can use that to your advantage. So if you hear the thing,
well, I mean, if you think about it,
if they say that in a defensive way, that actually means it's not settled. There's some people challenging the theory that science is based on, and often the challenger proves to be true over time.
Well, if you think about it, all dogs are derived from wolves, correct? So you only needed 2 wolves on the ark, and you can get all the breeds of dogs have been created from that. It wasn't improved on, but you changed the breeds, and you would bred them for whatever you wanted to get, traits you wanted to get out of them. That's completely different than improving the original breed or improving the original.
And I think some varieties are even self-bred, if that makes any sense. They seek out mates that look like them, so they tend to, the varieties become more stronger genetically. That makes it, they become more pure, whatever they are. They seek out each other in mating. So anyway, I believe that's true of some animals, at least. I guess you could argue the species, but because they think a lot of cats were just one breed and they have somehow subdivided the bigger, smaller cats. I'm not sure about that. You could argue that, for sure about how many breeds of cats originally were, but I can see where some of that could be built into the nature of the animal, where God would allow it so you would have more variety, because God likes variety.
The other pseudoscience
in nature, there's a lot of variety.
The other pseudoscience is global warming, and that's addressed in Genesis. Early on in the Bible, Genesis 8 says there will be no global warming. And so if these people who claim to believe in the Bible and believe in God aren't looking at some basic scriptures, and Moses wrote Genesis, we know that. And when Jesus talked about the apostles and stuff, he mentioned Moses by name. And Moses says, that seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall never cease.
So that's true. Very true. Let's look at Hosea 4:6.
My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, because you have rejected knowledge. I also will reject you from being priests for me, because you have forgotten the law of your God. I also will forget your children.
I would make an argument that evolution, they've rejected the obvious evidence of getting more and more of an intelligent designer through the information, the coding. But by rejecting that knowledge, they also rejected the Bible and any God, any deity that can tell them right or wrong. Man has, let's say, the intellect of man is the greatest thing in the world. By rejecting that knowledge, they put our world on a trajectory of decadence, and things are going to hurt our kids and lead to more and more problems.
When you see what's going on in society, you have to understand, or not understand, but you have to imagine that a lot of what's going on with the people that are developing all these theories and is not necessarily they believe all of it themselves. A lot of these people are doing what they do because they are trying to control and gain power. And authority and money that comes with that. Because a lot of it is so illogical. And I know there's crazy nuts out there doing some of this, and they are deranged and thinking incorrectly. But the ones at the very top, they're not necessarily the crazy ones.
I agree with you, Tom. Let me give you something I've often thought. Because they claim it goes back to some professors a generation or so ago who saw that socialism had failed in Europe and World War II and all over the world. And this thing, the workers against the owners would be the way they would overwhelm the world and bring in their new socialist utopia. But the problem was workers, especially in Western countries like America, Britain, Germany, and France, were doing much too well. I mean, so that it wasn't that big a deal. They had to come up with something new. Global warming was one of the things they did. I think the original guys at the top knew this was all part of just a way to get a wedge in. So the government has to control everything so they can control the environment. It's another excuse for radical, autocratic, socialistic government. But the younger people who've been educated on this garbage, they actually believe it. I mean, the guys at the top who started it, they know better. But a lot of young people, been to college the last 10, 15 years, they totally believe it.
And it's because they don't look into it and investigate. They just believe what they're told. And it's the point I was going to make also with my studying or having to study evolution for that short semester is that it really gave me an insight to what it really was. Before I'd been told and taught, you don't believe in this, it's wrong. I accepted that. But knowing what it really was all about helped me to really understand why I don't need to believe in it. Because it is a ridiculously illogical system of belief. And anyone who could believe that has either not looked into it deeply enough, or they just, quite frankly, just don't want to believe in God.
Well, that's the verse. Anyone who, I forget the verse. Anyone who claims there is no God is a fool, or I don't know how it goes. But if you're willing to jump through such hoops that you will believe a rock can be a man, you're not too bright. I mean, you're not too smart if you think that's how it works. So, I mean, that's pretty much why that verse is in there. I mean, you're not using your head if you think you can. I mean, what's the old adage that if anybody ever walk into a field and see a pocket watch just form, do you assume if you see a pocket watch in a field that it just evolved there? No, somebody lost a pocket watch. It didn't evolve. And what's the other one where they got thousands of monkeys typing and all in a room, and they eventually write all the great masterpieces, and that they use that as a proof for evolution. Eventually they'll write them all. Well, no, it don't work.
It never happened. You see a watch, it's got to be a watchmaker. By the way, part of what's scary about this lack of knowledge, or as Ronald Reagan said, they know things which just aren't true, but they think they're true. Let's take global warming, for instance. By the way, I'm all for electric vehicles when the technology is perfected and everything works and it's, whatever. But do you realize electric cars do add to pollution? Because that electricity had to be produced. They're just moving it from the factory to the car, but the factory actually had to do the polluting. And right now, China is expanding their coal plants, thinking we may have an energy shortage if we have a tough winter. By the way, this is kind of funny. I hope you see the irony of this. Believing in global warming as a ideology, but not in a practical way, our government, the new government, as soon as they got in power, they plugged oil wells. They ended the pipeline out of Canada. They closed down gas pipelines. They won't give any permits for new wells. They did some other stuff. Call it putting down the energy industry. This past couple weeks, guess what they done? They went to the oil companies and said, "Can you please lower your oil prices?" They went to Saudi Arabia and Russia. They export oil. Could you please lower the oil prices? I mean, they see winter coming, and the way it appears at this point, as we will see, and that includes all kinds of heating oil, even propane, because supply and demand will set the prices, usually do, always do, could be up 40 or 50% this winter.
And they didn't close pipelines. They closed our pipelines and opened the others, opened the Russian pipelines. So all they did was shift it somewhere else on the globe. So they did nothing for us.
Actually, as far as pollution goes, those countries produce it in a more dirty way than it would have been done in America. So they actually have added to planet pollution a little bit. But see, it's ideology over true knowledge or pragmatism. Hopefully, it won't be hard on us this winter, we hope. But can you see where that lack of knowledge, and you get false knowledge in there, including evolution, but global warming, can be bad for your society?
Yes.
And we will see how this winter unfolds. And I was thinking, I wonder when they start asking the oil industry, which they've been hammering, give us lower prices. I wonder what kind of answer they would get.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? This year, I had to, I use propane out here, and we had to spend an extra. What do we have? Like it was $1.19 a gallon last year, $1.49 a gallon this year, and plus my pre-buy for this winter was probably I think it was like $1.69. So my heating bill is already out of pocket 50% more or so than it was last year, and it ain't even him turning the heat.
And you're lucky you probably got some advanced contracts. If you wait till probably December, it'll probably cost you more.
Oh yeah, it could be easily $3 a gallon come wintertime, and that's typically under $2, and this year it could be well over $3. When I bought this house, I bought 2 500-gallon tanks just so I could get through a winter without having to get burned in the January for $3 a gallon propane. But now with our buddy Biden in there, who knows what it could go.
People are rejecting real knowledge for false knowledge, or knowledge they can use for their political gains. Let's look at Genesis 1:27. I'm morphing to focus a little bit on the importance of man, because I think that's really an important part of this creation, intelligent design debate.
All right, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Then God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth."
And this isn't the only scripture, but God told man to take care of the earth, but also to dominate it, because this planet in its current form was made for man. In other words, the planet is made for man, not man for the planet. The reason I say that is some of our more advanced governments are making rulings that make animals and trees more important than people. More important than people. And I'm not making it up, more important than people. And even having some people believe, just like with the abortion, there are too many people on this planet. After all, the trees are more important than people. We need to reduce the population of the planet. And who knows what evil things could come out of that kind of thinking to save the planet. By the way, I don't believe any such garbage. They thought years ago the planet couldn't feed the population. The population is double. And actually, there is enough food at the moment. It's just distribution and paying for it. But there is enough food on the planet. It's just a distribution and finance issue is the problem. And by the way, the messed up supply chain, at least is in part based on our government's attack on fossil fuels.
Oh, yeah.
And they're paying people too much money to stay home. In other words, our government is partly responsible for the supply chain disaster, which, according to stuff I heard this morning on one financial ag report, is going to create shortages in some things and will raise prices. So it will be a problem. I'm not saying people are going to starve, but you may not be able to get exactly what you wanted this winter.
Yep. I think everybody that listens to this program, and a lot of people in the church, already have plenty of forethought to get whatever they think they need and have a backup at available.
Yeah, I would, get canned goods in case your refrigerator is off for 4 or 5 days, power shortage. You at least have canned goods.
Dry milk, always a good idea to have dry powdered milk.
Yeah.
At the feast, I had some dried chicken wings.
That's not what I'm talking about.
They were dry, unedible.
Let's look at Psalms 139:13. I know we're moving into the subject of mankind, but it relates to this thing about how statistics just demolish the chance of evolution being true.
For you formed my inward parts, you covered me in my mother's womb, and I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth.
And I think what David is saying is when he was deep in his mother's belly, he was marvelously made. You think about it, if you ever see one of these, their little videos, when a mother's egg gets fertilized, all of a sudden that one little egg, this one little cell, starts a huge, unbelievable explosion of growth and development. Within a few weeks, you have a human being with its own heartbeat. They didn't know that, by the way, 40, 50 years ago. By the way, anybody think the Texas heartbeat bill has a chance of surviving in the Supreme Court?
Everything's going the wrong way nowadays, so who knows?
I do know a federal judge let it go for now. That is, Texas can let people enforce that bill for now. I guess eventually the federal government is opposing it. Here's something I didn't know. You know that of all the nations in the world, only a handful of nations have total unrestricted abortion. Most nations, after 24, 25 weeks, they don't allow it. And they have other medical restrictions on abortion. Where here, abortion has become such a holy grail. You can't put any medical limits on the doctors or medical standards. Well, that's terrible. But it actually endangers the young mothers, too. But babies are wonderfully made. I mean, adults are, too. But and I think we sometimes forget that. We're wonderfully made.
I don't forget that.
And by the way, I was just looking at, we're watching this video about the spine. You think of the spine as a simple little bone, but actually that's quite a unique little mechanism that shields all your nerve systems, or pretty much most of them, and of course holds you up. And it's quite a thing. And by the way, those bones also, inside the bones, they produce your red blood cells. And probably other things we haven't figured out yet. All I'm saying, everything that you think is simple, there's a lot more to it than we think. So God is a genius. He's a genius cosmologist and a genius biological engineer. Let's go to Hebrews 2:3.
How shall we escape if we neglect so great a salvation? For he has not put the world to come of which we speak in subjection to angels. But one testified in a certain place, saying, What is man that you are mindful of him, or the son of man that you take care of him?
Any thoughts, Dave, when you hear that scripture?
Well, he's obviously setting us apart from all other beings. King David knew that there was some reason we didn't have four legs, and there's some reason we weren't angels. And so I think he asked a really good question. What are we that you even are mindful of us, because God is so amazing, God is so great. David obviously was a great meditator. And he would sit and he would ponder great things and write these questions. So to me, that's what that says.
Let's read verse 7, please, Ken.
All right. You have made him a little lower than the angels. You have crowned him with glory and honor and set him over the works of your hands. You have put all things in subjection under his feet. For in that he put all in subjection under him. He left nothing that is not put under him. But now we do not yet see all things put under him.
I know the problem is people have debased themselves, and the devil probably encourages us to do that. So people don't look that impressive. But in one sense, the mind of man sets him apart from the rest of creation. I've even wondered that even beyond our programming, which I'm sure is quite unique for the human brain that supports it, but if the spirit in man, even though it's not immortal, has a certain spiritual something that the rest of creation doesn't have, it makes us special. And people, in the appropriate way, of course, should realize we are important because we're made in the image of God, probably both spiritually, mentally, and, if you look at the taxonomy of a person, all of it is built in the image of God.
People going about their daily lives not even giving a second thought about whether there is a God, or for that matter, whether there's a Satan, the devil, which is the even least they think about that. If you don't read the Bible, you can't get inspiration to wonder about God, because there's nothing in this world other than the Bible that gives us that sort of inspiration to ponder, like David did, about how great God is. And that scripture that we read a while ago, I get a little different from it than Dave did. I get that he was David, a humble man, was thinking, you're so great and powerful and can do anything. I mean, why do you even concern yourselves with us? I mean, why do you bother? And it's because the answer is because God is pure love, and he wants to share everything that he has with the family. And of course, that's another topic. But
let's go to our last scripture, Hebrews 2, please, Ken.
But we see Jesus, who is made a little lower than the angels for the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor, that he, by the grace of God, might taste death for everyone. For it was fitting for him, for whom are all things, and by whom are all things, in bringing many sons to glory, to make the captain of their salvation perfect through suffering. I will sing praise to you.
So God's goal is to bring us to glory, which we take that to be putting us in God's family. Wow. Putting us in God's family, being a part of his glorious family. So we should, all we have to do is remain faithful. Remember, the world and Satan are going to work on all of us to try to pull us away through apathy, lust, greed, jealousy, ego, and all that other stuff that human nature is subject to. We have to just hang in there, and we can someday be one of those sons brought to glory. So God's greatest creation is mankind.
Yeah, and you know, if you think about it, if you go from evolution to global warming that we touched on, the world has replaced God with the religion of global warming and evolution and everything that is anti-God. And that's what their religion is now. They anything that is against God, they pretty much worship it. Um, that's what they've done. They've taken the opposite of God and used that for their religion.
Well said. By the way,
They have worshipped the creation. They're worshiping the creation.
and look at the history of the 20th century, where all communism, fascism, which is just another version of socialism, a different version, and various versions of it were horrible. 100 million people killed, not in wars, but by their own government and communist type countries, smaller numbers in Cuba with Castro, larger numbers in China and Russia. But so history proves that does not work. So nobody ever learns it does not work. They think, well, the wrong people ran it. If we run it, I mean, that's what I'm sure all radical socialists and anarchists in America think, we'd make it work. How well is it working so far in the last 9 months?
Socialists never think what they do is wrong. They just think that they have not been allowed to do enough of it yet.
It's worked.
It's true.
Our economy is really running like a well-run. Anyway.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank everybody for watching. By the way, especially the statistical references. There are a lot of great ones that are complicated for us to explain. But Stephen C. Meyer, in his book, Return of the God Hypothesis, or his other book, Darwin's Doubts, will give you a lot of the statistical data that just destroys evolution. No way any of that kind of programming could happen accidentally, and it has to be there in the beginning. It was the animal won't work without the programming, and the programming is too complicated to have come by accident. It's worse than the chicken and egg thing, if you see what I mean.
Yep.
So keep all that in mind, and I guess we'll see you all next week.
Sounds good. Well, thank everyone for watching and thank everyone for coming. I didn't know if there's anything you wanted to touch on before we left, but
let's mention people to pray for. Pray for Ken's mother. You want to say anything, Ken?
Yeah, she could use it. She's in the hospital with COVID, pneumonia now because of it, and she's not doing well at all. And she's one step away from being on a ventilator, and that's the last thing we.
And she's 88. Which puts her
80.
at greater risk.
She's
80.
Yeah.
Okay. And we had lunch with your grandmother. She's a very nice person. Also, Gary Johnson is in the hospital. We don't know a lot of details, but obviously he could be doing a lot better.
Yeah, he's on high flow oxygen where they kind of blast the oxygen in your face. It's really uncomfortable. It's like a leaf blower on your face. So that's where he's at right now. So he's in pretty rough shape. Oh, and Kay. Anybody knows Kay and Dan Phelps? Kay's really struggling right now.
I know she was having breathing problems, and that was back in May, I think, when we saw her last. So I guess things are worse now.
Okay. Yeah, it's her legs. She's having trouble.
Okay. So as we get older and the world gets sicker or whatever is going on, we need your prayers all the more.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching. Hope you see you all again here next week. And I'd just like to say good night and everyone enjoy the rest.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken, Tom, Dave.
We're happy you could make it, and so glad you are here, and hope that we've been able to make God's word more clear. Until next time, may God be with you in everything you try. But for now, till next week, we have to say goodbye.